Hi everyone and welcome along. Before we get painting today, tomorrow is Valentine's Day, so if you need them, we've got loads of Valentine's card tutorials on our card making playlist. So anyway, on to today. We're going to paint a lovely, lovely vase of crocuses. It's a flower I love painting because they're so simple yet so beautiful. And of course, painting them in a glass vase is a whole other set of really interesting watercolour techniques that I get asked about all the time. So grab your paints and let's get started. I have an 8x6" piece of watercolour paper and we're going to begin with a pencil drawing. I'm going to start by just sort of getting a sense of stems coming out of my vase. There we go. So crocuses are obviously a very short stemmed flower, so this is going to be a dinky little vase, and I'm just going to draw in a little curve there to create the rim of the vase there, and I'll just draw two little brackets either side, which just creates a nice sort of soft rounded glass edge to the rim. And now we'll do just a rounded side. One side is always easier than the other, so already I'm like, it's funny, isn't it? Just one side is always easier. It's the way that our muscles form in the hand, I think. But don't worry, you can sketch it out a bit. You'll always find that with any of my paintings, that one side goes beautifully well, the next not so much. And then we'll place in that curve at the bottom. And then I'm going to add a base to the vase as well. And then I'm just going to slightly sort of more tapered little brackets either side there. And today we are also, because I really want to focus on how you paint the glass vase and the water and the stems in it, we're going to place in a waterline, so another curve. And I will just sort of get these stems placed in. Now what you're going to find is, of course, they hit the water and kind of disappear. There we go, so we're not really going to see them through the rim there. So I'm just drawing them in a little cluster. We might add in some extra foliage or something. We're probably not all done yet, so I might just sort of remind myself of maybe adding in a few extra little bits, maybe a few of the lovely shoots and leaves that you get with crocuses when they grow. And then going down into the jar, well, that sense that they sort of distort a little bit, so I'm going to sort of follow it in and then just almost sort of magnify it a little. And you see how I'm just sort of fluting it that little bit as it comes up to the top. And that is a really handy sort of level of drawing for the beginning. With our actual crocuses, I'm not going to draw anything else in for us. So that is pretty much all we need from the pencils. So if you were watching me last week, I was talking about if you struggle with drawing, this is the moment to pause the video, take a screen grab, and then you've got your line drawing, which you can download if you want. So the next stage is I'm going to wet the area around the edge of the vase. So I've got a filbert brush here. I mean, you could use a mop brush, use a large pointed round brush. I sort of fancied using a filbert brush. I thought that might be quite good for the edges, right round up to the edge of the vase. And of course, doing something with a lot of wetness on the paper, you might want to tape your paper down around the edges with washi tape. Sometimes when I'm filming, I need to sort of move the page about a bit, so I choose not to tape it down, but if you want to avoid warping, that's a good shout. So I'm just creating a nice wet area around the edge, and I've sort of loosely avoided the area where I'm painting the flowers. And whilst I let that dry, I can just get a little bit of shade in and around the sides. Now, the crocuses I'm going to paint a purple, so we're going to reflect a bit of that colour in the sort of shade around the edges. So I've got Moon Glow here, which I think is a really fab colour, and we'll get a bit of Imperial Purple as well, which is going to be a rather important colour for us. You can see they're quite similar, aren't they? So a size 8 brush, because I want a bit more control. I'm just going to dab in some colour around the edge, not everywhere, but just in places to create a sense of a shape around the edge. And a little bit of the purple, I think, will do some good. Oh, Moon Glow, not Payne's Grey. And of course the colour really fades right down. So if you're worried that you've put down a lot, do not worry, but I am going to add just a slightly stronger line of it down there to get that sense of shadow. Okay, it's quite a bright day here in the spring sunshine, so the page is drying nicely. I'm going to leave it like that, leave it to dry 100%, and then we can get on painting our proper piece. So time to paint some crocuses. I've got some great Imperial Purple in the palette here, which is a lovely purple Daniel Smith colour, but I'm also going to get some Permanent Rose. I just want to have some options with my purples, so we'll get a Permanent Rose purple and an Imperial Purple mix. Now, when crocuses first spring up out of the ground, we see them as quite closed, sort of upturned teardrop shapes, and when they are in a vase, they've probably been cut and they're out for a bit, so they will be a lot more open. So I thought we'll do a variation, we'll do a range. So I want to use a size 6 brush pointed round for this. So my brushes are Pro Art range, and oh look, we have our own branding these days, to Winton Paper Co. These are Pro Art brushes, so I'm a brand ambassador for them these days because I love the brushes so much. And you can buy the De Winton Paper Co ones just on my Etsy and my website shop, so head over if you haven't got yourself the branded versions yet, because how fancy are we? Right. I'm going to begin with the just Imperial Purple on its own, and we are going to paint some lovely sort of teardrop shapes. So I've done that one. I'm going to clean and dry my brush off because there's plenty on there now already, and I am just going to create that first petal on that first flower. I'm going to do this on the others as well, because what I want to do is sort of layer up my petals. So if you get those little drips in there, just go back, scoop it up with the brush. It's a really nice tip. We'll pop one in here. So that's why the pencil line of the stem goes right up into the length of the flower. It helps us angle the direction of our petals really well and keep them really nicely anchored. I have got a lovely tutorial on crocuses from about 3 years ago on the channel, which I was having a little look at this morning. I tell you what, there's nothing like having a visual representation of yourself on video for however many years to just sort of, I don't know, makes you marvel at the subtle differences over the years. I'm not at all fretting about aging. Aging's a real privilege. But it is just really interesting to see how your face just subtly changes over the years. It's kind of amazing. Right, so we are going to now start building up our crocuses. So the nice thing with painting in this style is there's sort of not too much water on the page. It starts to dry quite nicely. So we've got a choice. We can either do some fairly closed up crocuses, or we can do ones that have opened out. I'm going to start with a fairly closed up one. So all I'm going to do is add in, whoops, I shouldn't have quite flicked it out quite so much, but it's all right. Just a few extra petals on the side. A little bit of unpainted space is great, but also it's not completely vital. Next, I'm going to do one that's a little bit more open. So this time I'm going to have my petals fan out just a little more. So at this point I'm expecting the shapes to be still blending into one another. They're still fairly wet. It's not until we get to the point we're doing the sort of foreground petals that I really need there to be a sense of definition and difference. Let's do another little closed off one here. You can see that is starting to dry and starting to get the effect that we're going to be looking forward to using later on. And now I'm going to take a little bit of that permanent rose colour and just run it up the middle of some of these. Because it's a very similar colour, what I didn't want to do is put it in too soon so that it would just blend in and almost become invisible. But what I quite like about it is it's sort of slightly granulating. You can just see this lovely texture forming. Anyway, that's fantastic. We'll let it dry and we'll get on to the next stage. Now those have dried, we are going to create an ever so slightly more concentrated imperial purple, still quite wet. And I'm going to take a size 4 brush this time because I just want a bit more control. And I'm going to paint in some more petals. So let's start down here. So they're going to be unfurling out from the front. So some we may not see fully, and of course we're going to have some overlap as well. So even those nice closed off ones, we can add an extra layer if we want, or we might even have a sort of one petal that's unfurling down in front a little. I think if you struggle with sort of how you place your petals in situations like this, just always remember they anchor from the middle. Always from that central stem. And here you can either sort of layer over the top of the other one there if you want, or you could go round the edge of it. But essentially we're just building up these lovely crocuses. Now while that is still sort of creating and forming, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rigger brush and some more concentrated Imperial Purple, and I'm going to send a little line of colour just up the centre of some of these. And I'm going to now take some cadmium orange and just place a tiny flame in the centre where we can see it in certain spots. And you can see the cadmium orange is lovely and opaque and holds its colour really nicely. And then that means I now know how much sort of space I have to just create a few interesting lines. And you can see I've still got like a tiny bit of purple on the brush, and I'm trying a bit of orange on the brush actually in amongst my purple, and I'm quite happy about that because I'm just now trying to create a few of the little streaks on the crocuses, because you get these very sort of fine sort of veins. So we're just going to add a little bit of that detail, and then we'll move on to the stems and how they then sit down in the water. So you can see how I've sort of gradually built up lines and texture and colour, and now my front petals are also starting to dry up, so I can begin to add that bit of extra colour to them too, and also to decide which ones are going to layer in front of the others, because we've got that situation there. So just more colour, layering it up, still all with my 2/10 brush. Now, which one shall I go in front of the other? It feels like this one goes in front, so I'm going to paint sort of around the edge of it on the other flower, and then I'm going to blend that one sort of outwards on the other petal, and that's done the job really nicely. And then I can just sort of carry on with my detail, and we are pretty much there. So now we are going to turn our attention to the vase and how the stems come down into it. So I'm going to change over from purple to some different water, and I'm going to get some, I think, some cobalt turquoise and maybe a little bit of green gold will be a good starting wash for this. Okay, a bit more turquoise, I think. What I want to do is I want to create a sense of the top of the water hitting the light. So I'm going to paint a wash with my size 4 brush just along the edge of the water there, and I'm going to clean off my brush, and I'm going to just draw that colour down, and I'm going to sort of paint down the sides, but I'm going to sort of leave that highlight of unpainted space in the middle. I'm going to imagine the sort of back rim of the glass, draw that colour inwards a little bit, so on the sides there, and then in the actual sort of body of the glass up here, I'm going to bring in some colour and then clean off my brush. It's all about cleaning off your brush, and then just sort of very gradually drawing the colour down, and then we'll put in some on the rim there. I'm not going to worry about the back side of the rim because we're probably going to be covering that with our stems. Now, whilst this is drying, I'm going to add a little bit more cobalt turquoise in, and maybe just the tiniest bit of Payne's grey, just to make it a bit deeper, a little bit bluer, because we're slowly building the colour and the shape. So, and in fact, as is my general rule, when we're building up layers and colours, I like to just go down a brush size. So here's my size 2 brush, and this is my slightly stronger, deeper, darker colour. So we'll start again. So it's still a little bit wet, which is cool. And now I'm going to bring the colours just a little bit more in. So anything that sort of crosses the vase needs to be just on that curve. And then a little bit more Payne's grey. Well, that's quite a significant bit more Payne's grey, but that is what we need to just build up the lowlights even further. And I'm going to just accentuate the base of the vase there. Okay, so we're going to let that dry and come in for the next stage. Now looking at the stems, I've got 4 colours here. I've got sap green, green gold, yellow ochre and Payne's grey, and with a little bit of help from imperial purple, we are going to paint our stems in. So I'm going to begin with green gold, and what I'm going to do with my size 2 brush is to just start by building up the first stage. And you can see I'm painting quite dilute, and it's just blending over onto the base of the flower. And what I'm going to do is take some of that imperial purple and just send it down to get this kind of, it's a bit muddy of a colour, but it's just acknowledging the purple in the stem there. And then some sap green. I'm going to paint in all the stems like that, and then we'll get the little shoots coming in too. I'm so pleased with those. I think they look really 3D. Really happy with that. Okay, now I'm going to bring in the Payne's grey into the green gold. Makes a really nice, interesting green. Because my Payne's grey has quite a bit of blue in it. Anyway, and now I'm going to paint in some extra shoots. Sort of down to you really what size brush you want to try for this. Because there is going to be sort of overlap and things. If you want to sort of draw in pencil first where you want to go with it. So some might pop up like in behind. What's quite a good tip is painting them in really quite dilute first, because then they're not going to disturb the flowers too much, and then you can always go over them, or you can just with your brush just sort of smooth them. I think that's really nice, so I'll take a slightly smaller brush And this time I'm going to add in some of this nice greeny turquoisey colour into my mixtures, and I'm going to build up the texture on these. Having built up that colour, it's now time to get to the stems. Okay, so what we need here is a bit of dry brushing. So I've got quite a clean, dry-ish brush, and I just want to get some green gold on, but I want to try not to get too much. And it's difficult, but I'm just lightly pressing the brush, and it seems to be doing quite a good job. Yeah, you can see I'm really like scratching the brush on. Just trying to remember which which stems are which. But in doing this slight dry brushing, so I've got some sap green as well, so I can do that too. Oh yes, pleased with that. What this is doing is giving this impression of sort of the light in the glass creating sort of bounce on the stems. So it's a very strange feeling as a watercolour artist to be scratching your brush onto the page. And it's also really hard not just to like reach for more water, so I'm just trying to take the paint off my brush again. There we go, lovely. Have a little practice on a bit of paper first if you're not confident with this. Now, of course, I've painted in the ones. Oh, what a horrible noise. Painted in the ones we've drawn in, but there's now quite a lot extra in terms of stems and things, so maybe if I can try and dry brush a few more. Just sort of mentally following a few down. And also I think it's important to get variation now, so I might even try dry brushing a bit of Payne's Grey. I might just blot that off on my kitchen roll. Oh yeah, look at that. Ooh, I like that. And also with the Payne's Grey, I'm just going to add now a little bit of it more to just sort of the tops of where some of these are coming down. And a little bit of bottom there. And then this yellow ochre that's just been sat here, wondering what on earth it's doing. Well, it's now time for the yellow ochre, so I'm just going to bring in just a little bit of it, because there is sort of yellow ochre lurking in the sort of ends of the stems, and I'm really happy with that. So we're going to move on now to just building up this sense of the water. I'm going to just clean my palette a fraction. I wouldn't normally clean my palette if I was just painting for myself, but I need space to show you what I'm mixing, don't I? I think a bit of Prussian blue is going to be good for this. I want to get it really, really diluted, and I'm going to start to paint in some little ripples, really. Not too much, but just yeah, just a little to help that in. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bit of Imperial Purple, very dilute, and I just want to sort of just drop it in there, because glass and water, it's all about reflection, and of course we've got the purple so dominant in this piece, it's so likely that it's going to be reflected. So we're just going to let that dry and do the last finishing touches. The finishing touches of a piece are always about the extreme lowlights and the extreme highlights. What I'm going to try first is, I'm just cleaning off my one stroke brush here, because it seems to have some colour on it from a previous project. Dearie me. Now, my hope is that my vase is still a little bit damp and that yours is too. And what I'm going to do with that clean brush is I'm just going to try and just create, can you see I'm just creating, woo, look at that, that's cool. A little highlight, and then I'll take a little bit of kitchen roll and just blot it a little bit. So I'm taking the colour off, and I'm rather pleased with that. If you want, you could sort of smooth it in from the sides if you feel like you've got it a bit rigid. And then on the flip side of that, I'm going to now take my sort of deepest, strongest colours and start to just work in a bit more detail. So that will be, I've got Payne's Grey here. And I'm just using my 2/10 brush. And I'm, yeah, just sort of creating a little bit more around on the edges. I'm not like outlining the whole thing, but it's just helping, making it feel more like a sort of rounded bowl. And then up at the top, which we really haven't done a huge amount on at all, that's really nice. And what I will probably do one more time is a little bit more of the removing the colour. I like it. So there we go. There is your crocuses in a vase with some really nice techniques, looking at really getting those stems floating in the water. It's funny, I always see stuff just as I'm telling you goodbye. I'm like, let's just do a little bit more. Ant will be cursing me right now. This is quite a long video already. But hey, we want to get it right, don't we? I just love adding extra last little bits. Okay. We should know when to stop, and that is now. Thank you so much for watching. I really enjoyed doing this one with you. I just want to do that. You're like, come on, Harriet, we've got things to do. There we are. Okay, thank you. ever so grateful as always. I love painting for you, as you can tell, because I just can't put the paintbrush down. And I will see you again soon. But if you are painting with me, don't forget to share your work on Instagram and tag us at the Winton Paper Co so I can see your wonderful work. Okay, until next time, bye!